Augustin D'Eramo with Celebrate Life Around the World, and this is our second Excel for Impact workshop. Today we will be adding on to what we did in the first Excel Impact workshop, which was really the basics, learning how to navigate on Excel. In this workshop, we're going to learn new formulas, how to insert a basic pivot table, and also some just helpful tricks for data visualization here or for viewing our tables. So without further ado, I'll point our attention to this spreadsheet, Excel for Impact number 2. You'll notice on tab number 1, NGO expenses, we have a table for NGO expenses 2026. You'll notice we have another tab for attendee list. This is another spreadsheet I put together for the four attendees, let's say we had in a workshop. And we'll learn the CONCATENATE VLOOKUP drop-down list functions here. For this one, the NGO expenses, we'll learn the SUMIF, COUNTIF, if, and functions, and also the pivot table. So now let's point our attention to the NGO expenses table. First, we have in column B, the expense column. You'll notice we have training facilitator fees, office rent, executive director salary, all these things that it might apply to NGO work and the work you do as a nonprofit leader. So these span a variety of categories or expense categories. So in column C, I've put expense category. And we have 4. We have program, admin, administrative, shortened to admin, personnel, and technological or tech costs. And each one of these falls under one of these expense categories. We then have the amount in USD in column D. These are listed 2,000, 15,000, 12,000, etc. For example, for office rent, for the assuming a annual expense here, it's 15,000. And again, these are all just made up numbers for the purpose of learning Excel. As we learned last workshop, let's go ahead and utilize the sum function to tally up all of these expenses. So we're going to put equals. We always start with equals with functions. Sum, and you'll notice it already gives the range I want, D4 through D18. Those are the numbers I want to be added. And the total is 57,500. And there's our total. Easy peasy. Let's go up, and I want to further analyze this data, maybe looking at the total by the expense category. Lucky for us, Excel has the SUMIF function, which allows us to sum a series of numbers here, depending on a condition or a criteria. So we can do it by, let's say, personnel costs, by personnel costs. So in this cell, H8, I'm going to put personnel. It's very important here that you type it in exactly as it's typed in the table. So in the table, I spelt it this way, and I didn't include a space or anything. So you need to make sure there's no space. And we can double check that. Perfect. Let's go ahead and put in our formula. So as you see in cell I5, we have the formula. We take SUMIF, add numbers depending on a criteria. The range we want, that will be the expense category. That's how we're evaluating the criteria. So we're going to put this range right here. We'll press comma. Next will be our criteria, that is what we put in cell H8. Then the values we want to be summed or added together, and that is H4 through H18. We're going to close parentheses and enter. You see now that Excel has automatically added up these values for the personnel expense type or expense category. Let's try now with admin costs. Enter. We see it's $24,600. And finally, with the program costs, that will be $11,100. And why not check the other one, which is tech. That is 800 as well. For your work, it'll be important, again, to make sure these are all imported or inserted and added to the table correctly, because these functions won't work properly if we do not enter our data correctly. So that is our first function, the SUMIF function. When entering this number here, it may have, let's actually do it for program. Enter. It may not have the comma as we want here, so it may just say we can remove that here if we can. All right, it's already added, but sometimes it won't add that, and you can add it simply by pressing the comma button under the Home tab and the Number tab. We can get rid of these decimal places by pressing Decrease Decimal. And there we have it. Perfect. Let's now continue with the count function. And this is a pretty straightforward one. With count, we're simply counting the number of cells with a numerical value within a range. So value to value, we can also just put the range here, range that we want to be counted. So let's say we want to know the number of expenses here. We can do equals count numbers, as it says, numerical values, and we'll count these numbers here. And we'll enter, that's from D4 to D18. We should have 15 different cells, so 15 expenses essentially. We can also use the COUNTIF function to count cells based on a criteria. So as with SUMIF, I've put a criteria cell right here. Let's say we want to know how many program expenses we have in this table. Instead of going and counting it manually, we can use this function, equals count. Count. Well, we need an equals count if. So here is our function, count if. We first need to put, as you'll see in here, the range. We want this range from C4 through C18. Then we want the criteria. We want it to be program costs. And we're going to close parentheses and enter. And you'll see that we have 4 cells in this table that are program expenses. Let's try now with, how about tech? Enter. We have 3 different expenses that fall under that category. What about admin? 4, just like the other, and personnel, we have 4 as well. That is the COUNTIF function. Lastly here, for this table, we're going to look at the IF function. The IF function provides a logical test. So let's refer to the budget column, which is column E. Let me scroll up here. Essentially what we can do here is determine if these numbers, these expenses, fall within our budget or over our budget based on a condition. So let's say that anything over $1,000 is over budget for us. Obviously, this would vary in real life by what we're expected to pay, so your uses might be different. But to understand the formula, let's try that. Let's say if or equals if, so returns true or false based on a condition. Let's say we're going to test it for this cell, because we're in E4, we're going to test it for D4. Let's say D4 is, if D4 is greater than 1,000, then I want, as you can see the formula here, I want the value, if that's true, if it's over 1,000, I want it to report, we'll say open parentheses, over budget, and close parentheses, then comma. And if it's under, if D4 is actually less than 1,000 and that's false, we want it to say within budget, like this. Again, keep the parentheses here, and then we'll, or the quotation marks, and then we'll close parentheses and enter. You'll now notice that we put in the function, it's automatically set over budget here because 2000 is greater than 1000. And our condition was if D4 was greater than 1000, it would say over budget. Now, instead of putting this function on all of these cells manually, we can go to the bottom right corner of E4 and drag it down to E18. And ta-da, we have all of the cells filled in. You'll notice the ones over 1000 are over budget, the ones under 1000 are within budget. This may not make exact sense for this case since we're looking at different kind of expenses, but just to give you the rationale of the if function and how it works. We'll be looking at this function in future workshops. That is the if function. Lastly, I'm going to show you how to create a basic pivot table, and this might be easiest of all. Because instead of doing the SUMIF function, let's say we want to know the sum of all the program expenses or the sum of all the personnel expenses. Instead of doing this, what we did with SUMIF, we can go to Insert and select Pivot Table. Now to ask for it says, please organize your data in columns with a single header row. It wants us to know what table to pull data from. That will be this right here, this table. So let's say from B3, we'll say colon, semicolon, or no, colon, perfect, to E18. Now let's press check. And it now is recorded, NGO expenses, that table. We can either create our own pivot table or use one of the ones to create our own pivot table, or we can use one of the pre-made pivot tables generated by Excel. For our purposes today, we are going to focus on this first one. It gives us exactly what we wanted, the amount USD by expense category. So the amount, the sum by expense category, admin, personnel, program, tech, with the grand total of 57,500. We can insert that on a new sheet or the existing one. We'll put it on an existing sheet. And it asks us where we can actually just select the grid here. Make sure to give a big enough area when inserting this. So we can say within this region to insert it, we'll insert. It actually says it won't fit in that space. So let's try that again. Let's put it in this section. And there we have it. We have I'll X out of this. We don't need that. I'll go down. We have the expense category right here with the grand total and the sums here. All right, let's get rid of that. Apologies. So we have the expense category and the sum for each of those categories. Let's now go to the attendee list. Here is our training attendee list. And before I move on, actually, I want to look at this header row. You may notice that as I'm moving down, we lose the header row. It gets trapped behind our column titles here, A, B, C, D, E. So if we want to keep it, we can simply go here, go to View, and press Freeze up to row 3. We can actually freeze the panes. So now when I go down, the header follows. And that just helps us keep track, especially if we have a big data set and we're going down let's say hundreds of rows, we may not want to lose the headers we have. Let's do that on NGO expenses as well. We can go over and we'll press this and up to 3. Perfect. Now, you'll notice here, again, we have 4 people who attended this workshop. Ideally, we'd have more, but for simplicity's sake, we'll just have these 4. We have this guy, Augustin Edwards, John Williams, Dan Stewart, Lucy Smith, some interesting names. Let's say instead of having it by first name and last name, in different columns, we can use the CONCATENATE function to basically add the first and last name into column D without having to do it manually. Instead of writing Augustin Edwards, we can do equals, concatenate, join several text strings into one text string. We can select the cells, the first value as you see. So we'll want B4, and then the second one is C4 right here. And we'll close parentheses and enter. Awesome, so now we have the first and last name. But you might notice that there's no space in between them, and maybe we want that in our table. So let's go back to the formula. We can put a parentheses, or sorry, a quotation, open quotation mark. We'll put a space, and then a close quotation mark, and a comma, and then enter. And now we have, exactly as we want, Augustin Edwards. Instead of putting the same formula in these cells, we can just drag it down, as we did with the if function. And now here we are. All the names in column D. I also have the phone numbers and the emails for each of these attendees. Let's say this was a huge data set and we wanted to look up the phone number or the email for these people. This is where the VLOOKUP function comes into play. So let's say we want to find for Augustin D'Eramo. Not for me, Augustin Edwards. So the VLOOKUP here will say equals VLOOKUP. So we have VLOOKUP. First, we want the lookup value. So we're looking up information for Augustin Edwards. Okay, we'll put comma. The table we're looking at, we no longer need first name and last name. We can just do full name, phone number, and email for this, or even just these two. So for the phone number, we can just do these two columns. That's our table information. We'll put the index number. We'll put the index number refers to the column, which column we are looking for, or the value, where the value, in which column the value is in. And in this case, we are looking at the second column, the phone number here. So this will be column 2. And then it will ask us for true or false. So do we want an approximate or an exact match? We want an exact match because we're looking for a phone number to contact this person. So we're going to put false. We'll close parentheses and enter. And as you can see, we have the correct phone number for Augustin Edwards. Let's now do the email. We'll do equals VLOOKUP, equals VLOOKUP, returns the first search result in a vertical list. We are looking at the same person. We'll put a comma. We're now going to look at the full table here. So we have column D, E, and F in this. This time we're looking at the email, and that's the third column in our table. And we want the exact match. We'll close parentheses and enter. So for Augustin Edwards, the email is aug@gmail.com, as we can see. Now, you may notice it was a bit of a hassle to manually type in the name. This is where the drop-down list comes into play. So instead of writing this out fully, I can go to Data, and then to Data Validation under Data Tools, and we will select a list. So it will provide us a list of names or values. So the value we want, it'll be these names here. Let's go ahead and apply that to this range. So you'll notice I have Augustin Edwards. What if we want to know for John Williams? Now we immediately have, because we have the VLOOKUP function, the phone number and the email for John Williams. Let's say we want it for Dan Stewart. We have the phone number, 245-251, etc., and the Gmail for Dan Stewart. And lastly, we can look at the information for Lucy Smith, and Lucy's number is 246-152-4763, and that matches, and lucy@gmail.com. And there you have it. So that is all the formulas we will be reviewing today. I hope you got something from this workshop, learning some of these more intermediate level formulas that are applicable to NGO work. I hope you can use these in your NGO work, and hopefully they can allow you to have a greater impact and to better manage your activities with the nonprofit, whether it's a training list or managing your budget, your expenses. These could be of great use to you for data analysis, data visualization. So yes, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.